talking to Marco Rubio after making that decision, saying you're going to run for re-election. On the campaign trail, when you're running for president, you ended up missing a lot of Senate votes. In fact, in the September debate, you said, this is why I'm missing a lot of votes, because I'm leaving the Senate and I'm not running for re-election. So why do you deserve to be re-elected?
Well, the next line was I was running for president. And when you run for president, you miss votes. Bernie Sanders hasn't been here in 9 months, and everybody else that's run missed a lot of votes. I don't know of anyone who's been able to run for president authentically and legitimately and not. And I didn't like it. But there's other aspects to the job. As far as, look, this was not a decision that I thought I was going to make. I was ready to move forward. And when I was telling people up until 10 days ago, it was the truth. But I changed my mind. And I changed my mind because, number one, I never said I was perfect or I had every answer. And when you're not perfect and you don't have every answer, there will come times where you change your mind. But number two is because I honestly believe that no matter who's elected president, we're going to need a Senate full of people willing to act as a check and balance on the excesses of the next president. And I think, given the state of this race, we're going to have a lot of that over the next few years. Unless the Democrats have a majority, then they'll give Hillary Clinton, if she were to win, a blank check. So the issues are too great. I went back home to West Miami. We talked about it for a couple of days over Father's Day weekend. And we had two paths to choose from. And one was a lot more comfortable. The risk of not running, the comfort that comes from being in the private sector. But we chose the opportunity to make a difference in service, and I'm looking forward to the challenge. It'll be a tough race, but I'm looking forward to it.
But why do you deserve to be reelected after missing so much of the Senate's business?
Well, first of all, I'm proud of the thousands of people we've helped in Florida through our constituent service. I'm proud of the issues we've raised in my time here. I'm proud of our legislative achievements, quite frankly, in a Senate where not a lot have happened over the last 4 to 5 years, up until about a year ago when it started moving on some things. There's no one in this race that's better prepared, more capable, and has shown a better ability to stand up to the excesses of whoever might win this race. If it's Hillary Clinton, it's clear. I disagree with her on virtually everything. If it's Donald Trump as elected president, I'll encourage him to pursue good policies. And if he offers policies we don't agree with, we'll have to oppose those. And I know I'll do that. My Democratic opponents are going to be a blank check for Hillary Clinton.
Do you commit to serving 6 years, 6 full years, if you are elected?
Well, I'm not going to do any more of these sort of unequivocal pronunciations.
But don't the voters of Florida deserve to know?
Here's what they're going to know. They're going to know that I'm coming back to be a senator. I'm coming back fully committed to this job with as much passion as ever. I'll tell you this, if my plan was to run for president in 2020, jumping into a race like this with all the political risks associated with it would not be the decision one would make. I'm fully prepared to have the U.S. Senate be the last political job that I ever have, and I just want to be the best senator I can possibly be for the people of Florida.
So that means you closing the door on 2020?
All I'm telling you is if I were running for president in 2020, jumping into this race is probably not the decision most people would advise. I'm coming back to be a U.S. senator and to give my time and energy to ensuring that we have a Senate that can act as a check and balance on whoever is elected president.
You mentioned your legislative accomplishments, but one of the things that you're criticized for is immigration. Where does that rank in your career here, your first term in the Senate? You try to cut a deal, and then you abandon it.
Well, it's not that we abandoned it, it's it couldn't pass. And so one of the things that common sense tells you, whether it's in life or in this process, is if your goal is to actually get something done, you may have to change it in order to get something done. It happens every day here. In order to achieve a result, if what you want is a talking point, sure, you just put something out there. But if you want to achieve a result, an actual answer, you're going to have to take into account the opinion of 99 other senators and 435 members of the House and a president that will sign it. And that bill, as it was written, could not pass. It has less votes today than it did 3 years ago. I remain committed to the idea that we have to address this issue. I don't believe, in fact, I now know for a fact, that we cannot do it in one massive piece of legislation. There is a path forward on immigration, but it can't be in one massive piece of legislation. We tried it, we don't have the support for it, and as a result, nothing has happened for 3 years after.
Now, in your statement today, you said that Trump's presidency is still worrisome. Those are your words. But will you still vote for him in November?
Yeah, it's a choice between someone who I disagree with on a lot of things and someone who I disagree with on everything. And it's not the choice I wanted. I ran for president, and it's not the choice a lot of people are comfortable with, but it's the choice we have. What I do know is that no matter who wins that election, the Senate, under the Constitution, has an important role to play and to act as a check and balance on the next president. And if I'm re-elected to the Senate, that's exactly what I'll be, even against the president in my own party.
You suggested before you'd even speak at the convention on his behalf. Would you do that?
Well, I don't think I answered that question the way I wanted to, unfortunately. What I meant to say is, and I've said it since, is I'll speak at any Republican gathering, but it'll be about the things I believe in. I'm not going to change the things I believe in to fit into someone else's message. And I respect that, and that's probably why I probably wouldn't be asked to speak at the
Are you
convention.
going to go to the convention?
Well, I'll have to re-examine that now that I have a campaign to run in Florida, and I'll have to spend a lot more time there and a lot less time. Now, I'll have a lot less free time.
Do you feel any better about Trump's candidacy after he fired his campaign manager, gave a speech criticizing Hillary Clinton today?
Well, I didn't see the speech. I'm not aware of the internal workings of the campaign. I'm not involved with the campaign, so they'll have to answer for that part of it. I can ultimately tell you that my view of it is, yes, it's interesting what's happening now, but these campaigns are going to take a lot of twists and turns. I continue to be hopeful that on some of these key issues that we can move Donald on some of them and in a way that I think more reflects what I hope our country will be about. In the end, he's going to make his decision about what he stands for. If he's elected president and I'm reelected to the Senate, when he has good ideas, I'll support them. And when he has bad ideas, we'll act as a check and balance to stop him.
And polls are showing that actually he is struggling in Florida, but you are doing well. To win, do you have to separate yourself from Donald Trump?
No, I think in order to win, I have to tell people what I'm going to do in the Senate. The Senate and the presidency are two separate branches of government. The role of a senator is not to rubber stamp the decisions of a president, even a president of your own party. The role of a senator is to protect your state and act in the best interest of your people of your state and ultimately of the country. That's what I intend to do. As I said, obviously, traditionally anyways, a Republican will have more in common with a Republican nominee. In this case, we have a situation where I do disagree on a lot of issues with Donald. I disagree with everything with Hillary. So for voters, I know that's a harder choice for me. I'm running for Senate, and I'm coming back here, and we're going to be a check and balance on whatever happens in this.
Are you concerned, though? I mean, in 2010, you had a three-person race, and you look at what the last time there was a vote in Florida in March, you lost pretty overwhelmingly to Donald Trump. Are voters fallen out of favor with you?
Well, we're going to find out. I mean, we're going to have a campaign. That's why you run a campaign, and you talk to voters, and you tell them what you want to do, and they make that decision. I have no illusions that this is going to be easy. I didn't get into this thinking this was an easy race. This is a tough race, well-funded on both sides, in one of the most competitive states in the country in a very unusual presidential cycle. I'm fully aware of that and of the political risk associated with it. But I felt it was a risk worth taking in exchange for the opportunity to try to make a difference. And if it doesn't work out, it just wasn't meant to be. It was God's plan to.
I mean, that's what Democrats are saying. They're saying that they're going to put a lot of money, time, and effort in this place because if you lose twice in 1 year, your political career will be over. Did that cross your mind, and do you agree with that?
A little bit, but I told you this wasn't a political decision. If I wanted to be president in 2020, you wouldn't get into this. You know, that wouldn't be something that would motivate you to do it. That's okay. I want to serve. I'm going to work hard to be reelected, and if it works out, I'll do it with honor. I'll do it with a lot of hard work and with enthusiasm, and that's the direction I think it will end up. And if it doesn't, my kids will still love me, and so will my wife, and we'll go back and continue to live our lives in the greatest country in the world. But we're going to win.
Who ultimately prevailed on you? I know there was a lot of pressure from Republicans.
No pressure, none, zero. I mean, I understand what their preferences were and what people were asking me to consider, but my decision had nothing to do with anything anybody in Washington said to me. My decision was made in West Miami, Florida, in between breaks of watching the NBA Finals and pressure cleaning my driveway, and it was made between me and my wife with input from our children who are now old enough to have opinions, but not votes, but opinions.
And they all wanted you to do it?
Well, I think my family has made the commitment that it involves as a family to what public service means. And when you do that, you give up some things in exchange for others. And for us, it's the fulfillment of being able to make a difference. And I believe that I can make a difference, not just in this election, but over the next 6 years here in the Senate. And if we're blessed with the opportunity to do it, that's what we wanted to do.
It seemed like a difficult decision.
Well, it wasn't our plan. I mean, we were prepared to move into a different direction. We were excited about many aspects of it. And I was ready to be the defensive coordinator of the Florida Christian School sixth grade football team.
Not anymore.
Well, I designed a pretty good defense. We'll see, but I think they'll still be okay. But there was a lot of parts of that I was really excited about. And so, you know, we came off a long and tough presidential race. But so it was difficult from that realm. But in the end, I know we made the right choice.
Okay. And last question, will you? Yes, I know. Last question, sir. Will you? If Donald Trump is going to spend a lot of time in Florida, will you campaign with him?
Yeah, I actually answered that question before I even got in the race. You know, it's not that I'm looking to undermine him, but I think the differences between us on some key issues are so significant that I just don't plan to campaign. I've got to run my own race. I have my own identity. I have my own identity. I have my own positions on issues. And I'm not going to be out there undermining him or anything of that nature because I don't want Hillary to win. But I really think I need to tell people what I'm going to do as a senator as opposed to kind of, and that was going to be the case irrespective of whether I ran.